Sophie Laurent stood in the grand boardroom of Laurent Industries, her hands gripping a meticulously crafted proposal, one she had spent years perfecting. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier, reflecting the solemn faces of her father's executive team. She had anticipated resistance, maybe even some skepticism, but nothing prepared her for the sheer dismissal in her father's voice. Henry Laurent, the formidable CEO of one of Europe's most prestigious aerospace manufacturers, barely glanced at the document before pushing it aside. "Lucas will be taking over as CEO next quarter," he announced, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Sophie's heart pounded. "But, father, at least review the proposal. Our industry is changing, and AI-driven aviation can give us an edge." Henri raised a hand, cutting her off with a look of irritation. "Enough, Sophie. You've done well as an engineer, but leadership is not your place. Focus on something more suitable. Perhaps it's time you considered settling down." Across the room, Lucas Laurent, her younger brother, sat slouched in a chair, avoiding eye contact. He knew he was unqualified for the position, barely passing his finance classes and showing more interest in luxury cars than corporate strategy. But that didn't matter. He was a Laurent son. That was enough. The cold realization hit Sophie like a steel wall. No amount of brilliance, hard work, or innovation would ever outweigh her father's blind allegiance to tradition. She had spent her life preparing for this moment, earning top degrees in aerospace engineering, working on groundbreaking aviation technology, and even securing international partnerships to push Laurent Industries forward. Yet, here she stood, being told that none of it mattered. The air in the room grew suffocating. Sophie felt the weight of her family's legacy pressing down on her, but this time, it didn't feel like heritage. It felt like a cage. Her fingers curled into fists, but instead of arguing further, she straightened her posture and took a deep breath. There was no point fighting for a place that would never be hers. If they wouldn't let her lead the future of Laurent Industries, she would build a future of her own. With quiet resolve, she gathered her papers, turned on her heel, and walked out. She ignored the knowing whispers from the executives, ignored the hollow apology in Lucas's eyes, and ignored the condescending smirk on her father's face. He thought he had broken her. He had no idea that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The drive back to the Laurent family estate in the French countryside was suffocating. The towering chateau, with its ivy-covered stone walls and pristine gardens, had once been a place of comfort for Sophie. Now it felt like a prison. The moment she stepped inside, her mother, Isabelle Laurent, greeted her with a sympathetic look, already aware of what had transpired. "Your father only wants what's best for you," she said gently, her fingers nervously smoothing the silk of her dress. Sophie clenched her jaw. "What's best for me?" she echoed, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "You mean what's best for him? What about what I want?" Isabelle sighed, lowering her gaze. "Henri believes Lucas is better suited for the role. It's tradition, Sophie. Women don't run Laurent Industries." A scoff from the doorway broke the tense silence. Eloise Laurent, Sophie's grandmother, stepped into the room, her sharp eyes scanning her granddaughter's face. Unlike Isabelle, Eloise had never been one to accept the world's limitations without a fight. "That's nonsense," the older woman said, waving a dismissive hand. "Your father is a fool, Sophie, and fools rarely change their minds." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "So stop wasting your time trying to please him." Sophie's breath hitched. Eloise had always been brutally honest, but hearing the words out loud made them sting even more. She had spent her entire life trying to prove herself, believing that if she just worked hard enough she would earn her place in the family empire. But she finally understood. It was never going to happen. That night, Sophie sat on the balcony of her childhood bedroom, staring at the moonlit vineyards below. Every fiber of her being wanted to fight for what she had earned, But she realized that the real battle wasn't proving herself to her father, it was proving that she didn't need him. By morning, her decision was made. She wasn't going to waste another second chasing a seat at a table that had never been meant for her. She was going to build her own. The heat of Dubai hit Sophie the moment she stepped off the plane, a stark contrast to the cool, crisp air of Paris. The futuristic skyline stretched before her, a city of ambition, innovation, and endless possibilities. It was nothing like the old money world of Laurent's Industries, and that was exactly what she needed. With nothing but her engineering expertise, a vision, and the funds from liquidating her trust, she was ready to build something entirely her own. Within a week, she had secured a modest office space in the heart of the city's bustling tech district. Nothing like the grand halls of Laurent Industries, but filled with raw potential. This was her fresh start, and she intended to make the most of it. But the road ahead wasn't easy. Investors weren't quick to trust her. She was a Laurent by name, but no longer backed by her family's influence. Some dismissed her outright, assuming she was just another heiress with an expensive hobby. Others were skeptical of her AI-driven aviation concept, claiming it was too ambitious, too disruptive for an industry built on tradition. But Sophie had faced dismissal before. This time, she wasn't asking for permission. She was building her own future, on her own terms. Determined, she sought out the brightest minds, engineers, AI specialists, and visionaries, who shared her passion for pushing the boundaries of aerospace technology. Slowly, a team began to form, a diverse group of thinkers, risk-takers, and innovators. Together, they laid the foundations of AetherTech, a company that would reshape aviation through AI-powered flight path optimization, automated fleet management, and predictive maintenance systems. Every night, Sophie worked late, poring over algorithms, prototype designs, and market analysis. It was exhausting, exhilarating, and, for the first time, entirely hers. Unlike at Laurent Industries, where she had spent years fighting to be heard, here her ideas weren't just considered, they were valued. And despite the doubts, despite the struggles, she could feel it. AetherTech was on the brink of something revolutionary. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her small Dubai apartment, overlooking the shimmering cityscape, she realized something. For the first time in her life, she was truly free. The world had tried to tell her what she could and couldn't do. Now, she was going to prove them all wrong. The transformation from a small startup to a rising powerhouse happened faster than Sophie could have imagined. AetherTech had started with just a handful of dedicated engineers crammed into a modest office in Dubai, but within months, it was becoming a serious disruptor in the aerospace industry. Their AI-powered flight optimization system was unlike anything the market had seen before, reducing fuel waste, increasing efficiency, and predicting maintenance issues before they happened. It wasn't just another tech company. It was a revolution in aviation. As Sophie worked tirelessly alongside her team, she realized something crucial. AetherTech thrived because it wasn't burdened by the outdated traditions that had held Laurent Industries back. There were no rigid hierarchies, no nepotism, no board of directors clinging to the past. Every idea was tested on its merit, not on who proposed it. The culture was fast, innovative, and meritocratic. Everything her father's company had failed to be, and for the first time, Sophie wasn't fighting to be heard. She was leading. The real breakthrough came when a major European airline signed a pilot contract with AetherTech, giving them the opportunity to prove their technology on a global stage. Overnight, investors who had once dismissed Sophie as too ambitious were now lining up to fund her expansion. Every milestone was another step away from her father's shadow, another sign that she had made the right decision. Lucas called her for the first time in months, his voice heavy with uncertainty. "Sophie, I think I'm in over my head. Dad expects me to fix everything, but the company is struggling. Clients are leaving. The board wants change, but he refuses. What do I do?" Sophie's grip on her phone tightened. Lucas had never been cruel to her, but he had also never stood up for her. He had taken the position she had fought for, even when he knew he wasn't ready. And now he was asking for guidance. "You figure it out," she said simply. "That's what CEOs do." She could hear the frustration in his exhale, but she wasn't going to fix Laurent Industries' problems, not after what they had taken from her. Her priority was Aethertech now. The months that followed cemented Aethertech's dominance. More airlines integrated their system. Aethertech was invited to industry summits, where Sophie delivered keynote speeches about the future of AI in aviation, a future she was actively building. Every time she read a report about Laurent Industries losing another client, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She didn't have to destroy her father's empire. He was doing it himself by refusing to evolve. One night, as she reviewed Aethertech's expansion reports, she saw the headline that made her pause. Laurent Industries faces financial turmoil amid market shift toward AI. Her father had laughed when she presented her proposal. Now, he was losing everything to the very technology he had dismissed. Sophie leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a rare smile. This was only the beginning. The cracks in Laurent Industries had been forming for months, but now they were impossible to ignore. Market reports painted a grim picture. Clients were jumping ship, shareholders were growing restless, and the once revered aerospace giant was hemorrhaging money. The same airlines that had been loyal to Henri Laurent's old-school business model were now flocking to Aethertech, eager to integrate Sophie's AI-powered aviation system. The efficiency, cost savings, and cutting-edge technology were simply too compelling to ignore. The world was changing, but Henri refused to accept it. Inside the Laurent Industries headquarters in Paris, tension was suffocating. Lucas sat at the head of the conference table, staring at the latest financial projections. Profits were down 35% in a single quarter. His hands clenched into fists as his father stormed into the room, red-faced from yet another failed negotiation with an airline executive. "They don't want to negotiate," Henri spat, slamming a folder onto the table. "They're demanding we modernize, digitize our entire system. Can you believe the arrogance?" Lucas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "They're not wrong, father. The industry is moving forward. If we don't adapt, we do things the Laurent way." Henri interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. This company was built on relationships, on trust, not some soulless algorithm. Lucas bit his tongue. He had heard those words 1,000 times, but they rang hollow now. Laurent Industries' relationships no longer held weight in an era of automation, data-driven efficiency, and AI-optimized operations. The next blow came from the company's own board of directors. After months of internal debate, they finally turned against Henri, urging him to adopt Aethertech's technology or step down. But Henri Laurent was too proud, too stubborn. He refused to entertain the idea of working with the very daughter he had dismissed. As the pressure mounted, Lucas made the call Sophie had been expecting for weeks. His voice was uncertain, almost defeated. "Sophie, the board wants to acquire Aethertech. They see it as our only way to survive." Sophie leaned back in her chair, glancing at the Dubai skyline outside her office window. Aethertech had once been dismissed as an upstart, a gamble. Now it was the lifeline her father's company desperately needed. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Set up a meeting," she said. "I want to handle this personally." The air inside Aethertech's sleek, glass-walled conference room crackled with tension. The Dubai skyline stretched behind Sophie Laurent, the city's ultra-modern architecture a stark contrast to the mahogany and leather boardroom her father had ruled over for decades in Paris. This was her domain now. At the long table, Her executive team sat poised, tablets in hand, while across from them, Henri Laurent and his delegation had just entered. The moment her father locked eyes with her, his expression darkened in disbelief. "Sophie," Henri said, his voice sharp, masking the unease in his posture. "What is the meaning of this?" Sophie tilted her head, feigning innocence. "A business meeting, father. You requested it, didn't you?" She gestured toward the leather chairs. "Please, take a seat." The men from Laurent Industries shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Henri for direction. He was frozen in place, his entire demeanor unraveling. He had walked into this meeting expecting to acquire some nameless startup, not realizing the company poised to dismantle his empire belonged to his own daughter. Lucas, sitting beside their father, was the first to recover. Clearing his throat, he pushed forward a folder. "Let's get to it then." Sophie didn't even glance at it. Instead, she tapped a few keys on the conference room's interactive display, bringing up a market analysis chart. Laurent Industries had lost 40% of its aerospace market share in the past year. Meanwhile, Aethertech's numbers had soared, its client base expanding exponentially. "I assume you've seen these figures," Sophie said, her voice steady. "I'd like to hear your acquisition proposal." Henri's nostrils flared, his fists clenching on the table. "Name your price," he growled. "Everyone has one." Sophie leaned forward, her expression calm, almost amused. "That's where you're wrong. I didn't build Aethertech for the money. I built it because you told me I couldn't." She let her words settle before delivering the final blow. "And I'm not selling." A murmur ran through the Laurent Industries executives. Lucas exhaled sharply, his shoulders sinking as if he had already known this would be her answer. "But Henri?" His face reddened with anger and humiliation. "You did this to spite me," he accused, his voice hoarse. Sophie's smile faded. "No, father. I did this because I had to. You left me no choice." She stood up, smoothing the front of her blazer. "The world is moving forward. You refuse to change. That's why Laurent Industries is failing, not because of me, but because of you." Henri shot up from his chair, his hands trembling. He had spent his entire life believing he was untouchable, that his word was final, but now his own daughter was the one sitting in power, rejecting him outright. "This meeting is over," Sophie declared, her voice unwavering. "You should go." Henri stood there, stunned, before storming out, his executives scrambling after him. As the doors closed behind them, Sophie let out a slow breath. The battle was over, and she had won. The fallout from the failed acquisition sent shockwaves through the industry. Laurent Industries' stock plummeted, their remaining clients jumped ship to Aethertech, and within weeks the board of directors forced Henri into early retirement. The man who had once ruled the aerospace sector with absolute authority had now become a relic of the past, left to watch his empire crumble from the sidelines. Reports painted a grim picture. Without innovation, Laurent Industries was dying, and for the first time in his life, Henri Laurent was powerless to stop it. Sophie, however, had never felt more powerful. Aethertech was no longer just a promising startup, it was a dominant force, leading the aerospace revolution. Industry leaders scrambled to form partnerships with her, eager to align themselves with the company that had rewritten the rules of aviation. And in the midst of it all, Lucas reached out again. "I sold my shares," he admitted when she finally answered his call. "I never wanted this life, Sophie. Dad pushed me into it, but I don't belong in corporate. I started a sports coaching business instead. For the first time, I'm actually happy." Sophie paused, absorbing his words. Lucas had been complicit in her dismissal, but in the end, he too had been a victim of their father's expectations. And, unlike Henri, Lucas had finally found the courage to walk away. That evening, Sophie met with her grandmother, Eloise, at her favorite Parisian café. The older woman sipped her tea, eyes twinkling as she read the latest business headlines. "Your grandfather would have been proud," she said simply, handing Sophie a worn leather journal, the same one he had used when he first built Laurent Industries. "He believed innovation was always greater than tradition. Your father forgot that, but you didn't." As Sophie held the journal in her hands, she finally understood. She had never needed Laurent Industries to define her. She had built something greater, something that was truly hers. And as the sun set over the Paris skyline, she realized she had won far more than just revenge. She had won her own future. Standing in the Aethertech headquarters, overlooking the glowing Dubai skyline, Sophie Laurent knew this was just the beginning. Global expansion was already underway, with her company pushing into the European and North American aerospace markets, solidifying its dominance. The industry had once dismissed her, underestimated her. Now they sought her out, eager to follow where she led. News broke that Henri Laurent had officially stepped down from the company he had once controlled with an iron grip. Laurent Industries was in turmoil, scrambling to recover from its outdated ways. But Sophie no longer cared. She had built something greater than her father ever imagined, not out of revenge, but because she could, because she was better. As she prepared to take the stage at an international aviation summit, her assistant whispered that her father had requested a meeting. Sophie simply smiled. She didn't need his validation anymore. She had proven herself to the world and to herself. Before stepping onto the stage, she glanced out at the city one last time. Somewhere, another woman was being told she wasn't good enough, wasn't meant to lead. Sophie hoped that woman would do exactly what she did. Prove them all wrong. The story of Sophie Laurent teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, resilience, and the courage to break free from outdated expectations. Sophie spent years trying to prove herself in an environment that never intended to recognize her value. No matter how brilliant, hardworking, or innovative she was, her father's rigid beliefs and blind adherence to tradition kept her locked out of the future she had rightfully earned. But instead of wasting her energy seeking approval from those who would never give it, she redirected her efforts into creating something of her own. A company, a legacy, and ultimately, a life where she set the rules. This story reminds us that success is not about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. True power comes from recognizing when to walk away, when to stop fighting for a seat at a table that will never respect you, and instead, build your own table. Sophie didn't destroy Laurent Industries out of spite. She simply moved forward while they stayed behind. The world will always have gatekeepers who try to limit what you can achieve. The key is to stop seeking their permission and start creating your own path. Because the future belongs to the bold.